Decision to work on our class, I think it has quite a few layers. I think one is I've seen some performances in Europe which I thought were not doing the play justice. It's a marvelous, very powerful text, and most of the time it is staged in a chamber space with 10 actors, with a lot of this kind of sadness and respect, and a lot is already transmitting in the first few minutes. The audience knows exactly how to feel, exactly what will happen. It will be a very, very tragic and humble journey, but I think the play is much, much more than just that. And I also felt that it can take a much bigger space. I felt there's something operatic about it. I heard this kind of orchestra sounds, and the National Theatre in Vilnius has one of the biggest stages in Europe. It's overwhelming, and I felt this would be good space, but of course the main impulse was the history of Lithuania, and how this play could ring in the context of our own history, especially since Lithuania gained independence from Soviet Union. The subject of mass killings has always been, I wouldn't say a taboo, but it's been a very, very carefully tiptoed subject, also with a very strong advice of necessary narrative. There is one way to talk about Holocaust. There is one way of falling on your knees and asking for forgiveness, and also not giving time and space to reflect, but to react, I would say. The play came to me at the same time from two different sources, actually. I was at Yale by chance, already 8 years after my graduation, and dramaturg and head of dramaturgy program, Catherine Sheehy, somehow this text was on her desk, and it just came to me. And at the same time, the artistic director of the National Theatre in Vilnius was talking about new translation that appeared in Lithuania, and it was in the air. It was in the air, and it was clear that this play would make a very important statement in Lithuania, and nothing like this has ever been done. There were quite a few. There were some productions addressing Holocaust, there was some productions addressing history, but no one really was questioning it. So this was, I think, a first time that we opened up the possibility of multiple perpetrators, of codependence of victims and perpetrators, of neighbors, of rage and pain that comes from very clear traumas that were happening during the time of the first wave of the Russian Empire taking over these lands, of these imperial traumas, and of course of this East Jerusalem that Vilnius was centuries ago. One of the crucial decisions I was making is I wanted to bring a live orchestra on stage, and this idea came from looking, of course, a lot of research, but looking at black and white photos of Ukrainian pogroms in the 19th century. I saw very, very happy people sticking their faces into frames where old Jewish women were raped. Horrible, horrible images, and the locals were enjoying it. So it started to bring this idea of kind of Bakhtin carnival the idea of the public spectacle that the horror of a massacre creates. Why humans enjoyed so much public beheadings or these carnivals in medieval ages. And I really felt this energy in this image where the locals were enjoying themselves. The music was playing and people were taking pictures and they were having fun. And this idea of someone's life being taken away from them and their pure horror, fear and tragedy, and in the same binary you have someone experiencing completely opposite emotion, and that was striking. And at the same time also, nothing seems as it seems. The orchestra often was used during pogroms, playing very, very loudly to cover the screams and pain of those who were being killed. So I felt that live music would give us this necessary emotional connection with the audience. It would jolt them to feel something not necessarily comfortable if they were to experience this contrast of killings and party at the same time. This kind of carnivalesque, grotesque dance of death. So the orchestra came, brass instruments, loud, joyful, and the space came also out of the play, a moment where the ideology is changing, the power is changing, the Soviets are coming, the Germans are coming, and back to the Soviets. The space, the public space of a church or a place of worship or synagogue or Orthodox church or Catholic church has been transformed into a culture palace or a place for meetings, parties, celebrations. And I felt these layers, these historical layers are extremely important, and also in the performance you saw last night, it's just now you make me realize this, because I was not connecting it consciously, but it is very much similar idea of covering up the past with layers and layers of bad paint, and something that was not has been adapted to function in a new function. So in Vienna Woods we have the old sports gymnasium that has been adopted to this rental house to celebrate weddings or have banquets for funerals. In our class, this is very much an old synagogue or a cathedral that has been adapted to, or maybe a public school, something that has been, in a way, raped into becoming something else. This transformation, violent transformation. And there is a moment in the play where one of the Jewish young men who becomes a leader in the Soviet in the Soviet Republic, he says, let's take some of the benches from your church. They don't serve any purpose now. We can use them for a movie theater. And this is a very important kind of point of view of someone without faith on looking at the object as a functional object, in a way desecrating the original meaning and function of it. And this curse continues. That's what the Lithuanians are doing to the Jewish objects, that's what the Jews adopting to the Soviet ideology are doing to the Catholic objects. I was very, very surprised when I brought up this horror Tales of Yana Woods in Lithuania. I brought up with artistic director and actors and in the theater community, a lot of people were surprised that this play existed. And I think my education has placed Horvath in this very important canon of classic European plays that I treat, it's just someone between Chekhov and Hanke and Bernhard and so on, and also in relationship to Frida Jelinek, whom I adore and often work with. So for me, Horvath is a theater master, and for in Lithuania he's practically unknown. This play has been staged once, 30 years ago, in the Panevėžys theater, and no one really knows him. So in a way similar what was happening in Germany in the 60s, where he was rediscovered. He was well forgotten during the war, and then people like Fassbinder and Hanke were reclaiming Horvath and actually making a statement that he's more important than Brecht. This play has always been in the back of my mind. Once in a while I've seen it in the German repertoire. I've seen the fantastic performance of Christoph Marthaler with the famous Austrian actress Bettina Stucke, who does not look like a classic Mariana. She's about 80 kilos heavier and creates a very strong reading of the play. I've seen Thalheimer production in Deutsches Theater. So this play has also kind of visual memory in my head. But I also felt that for Lithuania, the question of middle class is important, because Lithuanians themselves don't necessarily identify with the middle class, even though all the structure and all the elements of the petty bourgeoisie is right here. But somehow or they are humble enough, or they don't quite allow themselves to own this middle class title. And of course the middle class is often the one with the most power, no matter how passive, but this is the class that votes. This is the class that makes a lot of economic decisions in the society. And so I felt, kind of on a very basic level, this is a very good play to engage the society in a dialogue. And then I felt a certain change, of course, in Europe and in Lithuania, maybe slower and less aggressive as it is in Poland or Hungary, but still the world is turning more conservative, more traditional, and this look and reverie of the past is very, very prevalent in Lithuania, and this is what this play is about. It's about glorifying the past, it's about not changing status quo, it's about keeping in with tradition. And then you see, as an example of a very small, not necessarily talented or exceptional person, an attempt to change something, and the big wave that sweeps her right back. There are some moments in history, of course, that the common Lithuanian psyche is referring to, is this Battle of Grunewald. You cannot not think about it. This is the ultimate victory, and the place of Lithuanian as a savior of Europe. Also, the first coronation of Lithuanian king. The size, also this very megalomaniac sense of a very common reference of having the legend is that Lithuanian horses have drank of the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. So the distance between Turkey and Latvia borders, it was all Lithuanian. Yes, we have a extremely sensitive situation right now with one of our best Lithuanian playwrights and novelists, Marius Ivaškevičius, who has been crucified for a novel called The Green Ones, which he wrote 15, almost 20 years ago, and he has been recently nominated for our biggest national prize, not just literary prize, but a culture prize. And in conjunction with this nomination and political campaigns for the next presidential elections, he has been turned into this scapegoat and this kind of witch hunt of the writer who was provoking dialogue of the guerrilla fighters of this partisan movement in the 40s and 50s exploded. And people who have never read this novel have been writing open letters, have been collecting signatures to strip Marius of this national prize. And I think a criminal charge, or there has been some kind of case opened. I think it's, thank God, kind of died down, or has been, the storm has almost passed, but it's been completely absurd situation. It was uncanny because we wrote the scene 2 weeks before Marius has been attacked. But it's something in the air. We were following kind of this historical discussions. But the way we build this scene is every single character who has an opinion has a ridiculous opinion. None of them carry the real truth. None of them can really coexist. But this is very much a Lithuanian reality. There's a lot of legends and mythology, even in the current history. I hope without really pushing it, recreates this archaic sense of what Lithuanian family is about. And it reflects then a much bigger picture of the society, and the society is extremely traditional, and people really resist a big change. So it starts very, very kind of local in this family unit, and everyone is against this young woman trying to do something with herself. It's not needed to them. With our class, we knew we were provoking a public discussion of this painful history, but we had no idea that the form of the performance would be the main kind of source of the negative reviews and this kind of public attack on artists. So it was very strange that no one was really objecting that we were working on the subject of Holocaust, or we were digging into Lithuanian history, but everyone was objecting that we were allowing ourselves to play with different genres and forms that were not right for the subject of Holocaust. How can you create the situation of borderline black humor, or create this kind of circus environment, or this distancing effect where the only way of looking at the Holocaust is this humble kneeling and total surrender. So this was the most painful moment, I think, for the theater community, for critics, Not so for the audience. The audience really learned and was extremely focused, and the audience developed also with the performance. It really became, after 6 months, it suddenly became completely sold out, and it's now still playing for its 6th or 7th season, still always full on the big stage of the National Theatre. But the initial reception of the local critics was kind of this visceral anger and a lot of accusations that this is not the way to stage a Holocaust play. People grow and change, and the world is changing, and I think also the codes that we're breaking in the Vienna woods, they are more kind of pointing at yourself as opposed at the other or at the neighbor. So it's not the responsibility that we were asking to take in our class, not just for yourself but for the others. In Vienna woods, it's more really, I think it's easier for the audience to laugh at themselves or at their grandparents, and be more self-critical, and also recognizing these tropes of weddings and funerals and these archaic traditions and these contradictions, and this it's a little bit more forgiving in a way. Than they can take this kind of patriarchy binary, and this they can take even quite disgusting, I would say, sexual provocations. They can take it, and I'm really proud of them, that even the older audience, no one really slamming doors and leaving. So there's hope.